Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults, a podcast dedicated to supporting survivors of cults and human trafficking. This show is hosted by myself, Anonymous Andrew.
And my name is Melody. I'm going to be Andrew's co-host. I'm also a cult survivor myself from a cult called the House of Yahweh. I am a cult advocate and creator and administrator of a cult support group on Facebook called Cult Escape and Recovery. For guests on our show, we do want them to understand that we respect privacy concerns. You can always remain anonymous or use a fake name.
And Melody, this is a safe haven for those who have been in a cult, survived, and escaped, and are now on a journey of recovery, trying to put their life back together. So join us as we learn together about the culture of cults.
And Andrew, we also want to add a trigger warning that some episodes may contain explicit subjects including sex abuse, rape, human trafficking, suicide, and other potentially disturbing topics.
Hello and welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults. And my name is Anonymous Andrew, and with me is...
My name is Melody. I'm a cult survivor, and Andrew and I are excited about launching this new podcast and trying to give a safe space for people to come and share their stories with us. And we've already kind of got some episodes that are already ready, and we're ready to drop those so you can start listening right away.
Yeah, and Melody, I want to give the audience just a little bit of a background about how we got started. So, you know, I do have this other podcast. It's Anonymous Andrew Podcast, which is a dating and romance podcast. And it's in season 2. It's got almost 150 episodes. And a couple of months ago, I was approached by a woman in England, and you'll hear her. She's on one of the episodes you'll hear on Cultimatum. She talked about how angry she was at the Twin Flames cult because they were abominating the concept. The Twin Flames concept is real. It comes from Greek mythology. And it's this whole thing about you can actually have a twin flame, and we won't get into that now, but
it's
she
like
approached me and
match.
Said, right. And there are people in the world who actually they read the Greek mythology and they follow it. And there's actually 7, I think, steps or something that you have to go through to actually become an official twin flame. Anyway, when she heard about she saw the documentaries on Netflix and Amazon, and she was just angry, I guess is the word, passionately angry about that. She wanted to come on my show. She had been listening and asked if I would do an expose on that. And I said, sure, because at the time I'm thinking, she talked about her fiance and she was trying to be twin flame. So I'm thinking, okay, this is romantic and it's part of my podcast theme.
Right.
But when I saw the documentaries and then I joined a twin flame support group, and then I started to see what was really going on, and it caught my attention. So long story short, I did a whole series on the twin flames. And then that was months ago. And then I went back to doing relationships. And then that's where I stumbled upon you, I think.
I think
there's another
I think you posted
woman
in the Cult Escape and Recovery group on Facebook that I run. And yes, and then and you were looking for people because you got interested in cults, looking for people who wanted to share their story of being in a cult or a cult survivor. And I think I was the first one to reach out to you.
Right. And we did, I think you were one of my first interviews from that second. So all of a sudden I had a second pod series about cults, but halfway through, and I got some feedback from my regular listeners who said, we love your show, but we don't listen to the cults. And I get that, because if you tune into my regular show, my other show, you're tuning in for the dating part and the romance part and the experts that I have on. And then the next week, all of a sudden, you're hearing about
cults, and you might not care about cults.
Jehovah's Witness and something. Yeah, they may not care. And you and I had already recorded, I think, 3 or 4. We had Judith Castillo on. Right. We had Gary from Jehovah's Witness. We had Jessica. We all of a sudden, it grew legs, like
Yes.
I say, and so thus there comes this podcast was born.
Yes. Long
I
story
couldn't get that
short,
word out.
is the cults were starting to take over your other podcast, and you were like, "Oh, wait a minute. Let's put on.
Exactly.
Let's see what we're gonna wait. How are we gonna do this?" Because I think that you got a lot more
And
response than you expected. I mean,
I did. I
yeah.
did. The Twin Flames got a huge. I gained many listeners, and it was a success. And then the second one was also growing legs. Like you said, I was all of a sudden inundated with all this cult, and to be honest, I had all these guests from the other podcast that I was pushing to the side that I had already recorded, and it just wasn't fair to them.
Right.
But that's like the pragmatic, logistical side. Let's talk about the emotional or the human side of it.
Yes.
Is that I wasn't aware, and you are a cult survivor, but I was not aware, even in 2024, of how many cults there out there, and
Yes.
how many are getting away with what they're getting away with, the brainwashing, the recruiting techniques. And
Yes.
I have to say it, the sexual abuse
Yep.
and even rape and all that. And we do see some, like in La Luz de Mundo, one of the apostles is doing time for sexual abuse.
Yep.
They're trying to bring down Twin Flames because it's a scam. They're sucking people money. If you're heartbroken, they want you to join, but you got to pay $8,000 to take a course on how to find a twin flame. All of this started to get under my skin, and I said, "This is not right,"
Yeah.
And and as we started listening to some of the guests, I really started to feel bad for these people.
And
I've
you
had
know,
a rough life
having
in
said
my
that,
own way,
Andrew, I am going to add that I think that I love that you have so much empathy for cult survivors, and I think it's really interesting because it is there are so many people out there that make this statement that they say, and maybe this was part of your interest. They say, "Oh, I would never get sucked into that. I would never join a cult."
Yep.
Well, here's the thing.
Yep.
People don't join cults. People don't join what they believe are cults. And
No.
I think maybe what you saw in that is that, gosh, I could have potentially been pulled in by this twin flames thing because of you were vulnerable because of what you were going through. And then you
At the
therefore,
time of my breakup. Yep.
yes, and therefore you then had this extra amount of sympathy for the people who are going through something like that. And you're like, wow, I could see how people might get pulled into something like that. And here we are.
And I say nobody wakes up in the morning saying, "Hey, I'm going to join a cult today."
No,
It's silly, nobody would do that. But
no,
the way these cults are designed, and you bring this up often, they're carefully, craftedly designed, and how they recruit people. One of the stories that I remember is we just did last week was Mandy, who she was 16 years old, and
yep,
she was going through a breakup, and somehow they found out. They came knocking on her door, and they were persistent. And
yes.
a couple of weeks later, she was in a cult.
Yeah, they were offering her rides
Unbeknownst
to
to her.
meetings, and yeah, exactly. Yep, they kind of took her under their
But
wing,
she never,
and she just thought they were
right,
being
but
kind.
exactly. But she never once said, "Oh, this is a cult." I think obviously down the road, but and a lot of people, from what I'm listening to in the interviews, a month or two or three they realize that maybe what they got into wasn't what they were told at the beginning, but they're already invested, or they've
Right,
already got brainwashed. And the cult got their claws into them already. So it was,
absolutely.
and here, explain to the audience what a lot of cults tell their members about if you leave the cult.
Oh gosh, I mean, there's a long list, but the biggest one is just basically that first they try to make it so that you don't have a support network. They try to isolate you while you're joining or as you're joining. They try to isolate you more and more from your friends and family. They try to put a wedge between your friends and family. And they can do that in many different ways. It can be, we're not celebrating holidays, so now you're not getting together with your friends and family for holidays. It can be, oh, you can't talk to them because they're an apostate and they're going to pull you away. They're going to put a division between, if it's a religious organization. They're not all religious, but if it is, they're going to say they're trying to come between you and God. That if you talk to that person, if they're saying
Right.
negative things about the church or about the group or about us, then you have to disassociate with them, because they're going to basically cost you your salvation. So you're isolated, because and the only people you're really talking to is people that agree with you. And we all know, when you only talk to people who agree with you, you don't learn, you don't grow, you don't get new opinions, you have no influence of something different. And then when so now you're isolated, you're there, and then they tell you, if you leave, you're going to be cursed. Bad things are going to happen to you. You're going to get in a car accident, you're going to get cancer, you're going to get illnesses, you're going to get diseases because you
You're going to
left.
be alone.
You're going to be alone. Nobody's going to help you. You're going to be poor and
Right.
destitute. You're
Nobody's
going to burn in hell.
Exactly. I remember we interviewed, and I know people were. This is the pilot, but remember we have already recorded many episodes. I think it was Mandy who said that somebody, when she got out of one of the cult she was in, she was somewhere, and somebody asked her what her favorite movie was, and she didn't have a favorite movie because
Yes.
she wasn't allowed to watch movies. So
Yes.
it's when people get out of these, survive and escape these cults, their path to healing and getting their life back are. She was so excited to go see there was a country western concert she went to that she
Kane
was
Brown.
so excited
Kane
because she had
Brown,
never
and I
heard
love
one.
him.
Yeah,
Kane Brown. He's good.
yeah, but it's sad that she. I think when we interviewed her, she was in her 30s, but
Yes.
she was in the cult since she was 14 or 15 or 16,
Yeah.
and that's 16 years of her teenage years, her 20s, that she didn't get to experience what most of us do.
Yes,
And
and you lose a lot of
movie.
references. Yes, even age relevant references. People your age are talking about, oh, the songs and movies that were going on during that time frame, and you're like, well, I wasn't listening to movies or a song or music and going to movies during that
Exactly.
time, and so I'm out of the loop. I don't understand all these cultural references.
Yeah. So, I started to say before that I've had a rough life, but I brought that on myself. If the audience doesn't know from the other podcast, I'm a recovering alcoholic. So I did a lot of damage to myself and the people around me, and I take responsibility for that. But now that I'm in sobriety, and as a matter of fact, my 9 years is coming up, I
Congratulations,
honestly think
Andrew.
I found. Thank you. I
Yeah.
honestly think that I may have found a purpose in my kids are all grown up. I have grandkids. I'm a single man. I'm living alone, and there are times when I come home and I'm like, another night of Netflix. Now I have purpose. It may sound silly to some people, but I'm 64 years old, and I used to be a very extroverted person. I used to party and go out, and I was the life. But that was the drugs and alcohol days. And yes, I don't want to paint the picture that sobriety is boring and you're lonely. That go listen to the other podcast to hear my story about my girlfriends and being single these days. But I'm happy to do this podcast to give these people that are suffering or escape or have just escaped and are trying to. But I keep saying it. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. So it's like trying to put all the pieces back together in your life,
Yes.
and it's not easy.
No,
And
No.
thanks to you started a support group for many, and now we're finding there's so many more support groups out there.
Yes.
I think you even said yourself you found many Jehovah Witnesses support groups.
Yes. Yes.
It
There's
just
quite a
boggles
few of
my
those out
mind
there.
how many cults there are.
Yes. Yeah. It's crazy how many there are out there, but I love the fact too that we're going to include that recovery aspect of it, because it's not just diving into the details of the traumatic stuff that happened to you, but we want to talk about also even what did you
Right.
do to recover? What are some of the things that you're doing now to help in your recovery? Because hearing those things can help inspire other cult survivors that maybe just got out last week and they're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know, what my
And
future looks like. And when they hear other people saying, "Oh,
and
this is
I
what I did," it gives them hope.
Yeah, and I don't want people to think that each episode is going to be a very sad
Right.
and melancholic, listening to what they went through, because each and every one of the people that we interviewed, they are now free and they are
Right.
enjoying their newfound freedom. They're going to movies, they're going on dates. Some of them have started families now, and they're of course they go to therapy and
Yes.
trauma therapy and whatnot. But there's almost every episode we've recorded, there's been a happy ending, a
Yes,
very happy ending.
absolutely. Yes, exactly. So it might start out with the details and the sadness of their story. And sometimes you actually need to hear that to appreciate where they
Yep.
are now, to appreciate the recovery and how they deconstructed and reconstructed and put their lives back together.
Okay. So just so if you're an audience member listening to the pilot, know that the next 10 to 12 episodes have some of them have already been aired on my other podcasts, but I'm moving them to this podcast because this is where they belong. they
Right.
they just didn't belong under the other podcast.
And
So
make
you
note,
may
I'm
have
not
heard them
I'm
or you
not
may not.
co-hosting.
So
I'm not co-hosting in any of the Twin Flame stuff because I didn't even know
thank you.
Andrew. Had not met Andrew at that
Yeah,
point. He did that all on his own.
good
And
point.
then I came in the picture afterwards. So you won't hear me on any of the Twin Flames episodes because Andrew and I didn't know each other.
Good point. Yeah. So there's going to be maybe I'm going to guess 5 to maybe 9 episodes that you will not hear Melody. Um, but to be honest, Melody, if we had time, I would like re-edit, redux them, and bring you in and do it. But it's a lot of work,
Oh
so
yeah, no,
I think I'll just
I'm
post
good
them.
with that.
But
We already got a lot of work,
but
Andrew.
since
You're already doing 2
we
podcasts here.
yeah, but since then we've recorded about 5, and we have 5 more lined up. So
Right.
we'll be hearing a lot more Melody. So, and I can't thank Melody enough. I really want to make a public gratitude to you for, I came to your group and I said, hello, my name is Anonymous Andrew. I have a podcast and I'm doing a thing on cults. Can I post in your group? And you were very welcoming and very open. And what
And
I
I think
got
that,
when
and
I
I
went to
know that
the,
you probably didn't get that from all groups because some people are more private
I did.
and some, but I really, because I think I've always thought that I've always been very open about my own cult story. And I've always been open to share it because I feel like if somebody can learn from my experience, then I didn't go through that for nothing. So I'm like, yeah, I loved that you were doing that. And I want to thank you for that because I think that that's amazing, giving that platform to those who are wanting to share their stories and willing to share their stories. Because a lot of them they want to share their stories, but they're like, who wants to listen? Nobody cares, and they may feel that nobody cares.
Oh,
But there are people out there that are interested and
right.
do care.
And I'm going to give some kudos to Amazon, Netflix, HBO. They've been
Yes,
doing their due diligence in documentaries, but not everybody gets to be chosen to be in a documentary.
right.
And this is so when I posted in Twin Flames escape group, there's several Twin Flames. people were asked, they thought I had an agenda. Like, what's your agenda? Like, they didn't trust me
Right.
until they started listening to some of the episodes. So
Right.
I
And I'll
there
tell
is
you,
no
Andrew, some of
agenda.
that comes from being in a cult. Some of that distrust comes from exactly that.
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
of course, and you'll notice, and I don't really know that I need to focus on this, but this is also there's no neither Melody or I are getting paid for this.
Right.
You will, as of now, you will not hear any commercials on this podcast. There's a couple of reasons for that, but we don't. Right now, it's a free podcast without commercials, and Melody and I are doing this because we care and we
Yes.
want just to give people a place to come and share. Not like I said, not everybody can be on a documentary, but the least
Right.
that I can do. I'm what they call an indie podcast, an independent podcaster. I don't belong to Podcast Nation. I don't belong to. There's like all these like Spotify, and
Right.
I'm not sponsored or belong to any major network. I'm just me. So
Right. We're doing
if
this
I
because we're
can, if I
passionate
can,
about it.
if
We're
I can make a
passionate
little
about
bit of
it,
a
and
difference,
yeah. And
yeah,
it's
I just
very
want to make it. If I
interesting.
can make a little bit of a difference to somebody,
Yes.
exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. So, uh, okay, Melody. Anything else we want to
I'm
tell the
just going to add
audience
to that. And I
about?
don't know if I already said this, I may have, but I'm going to say that too, for a lot of people, telling their story is part of their healing journey. Some people, even if they're nervous or they're scared to come out and tell their story, because usually you are, especially in the early years, but a lot of times after they come on and they tell their stories, they're like, wow, it felt really good it's therapeutic just to tell that story and have somebody listen and feel like it's like you have it trapped inside, and once it comes out, you're like, wow, I feel lighter, because carrying that burden can be heavy.
Sure, I could. I never like comparisons, but I go to a 12-step fellowship, and because I'm an alcoholic, there only another alcoholic could really understand what I went through.
Right.
So it's that peer to peer. So it's somewhat similar in the cult, and that's why I asked you to join me, because I will never ever understand what you went through, or any of our guests went through. I can interview, I can open up a show, and I have this nice deep voice, but I need somebody like you who can be more just a great example. We tell every guest before we record, and Melody does this. Is there any topic that's off limits? Is there something that you're sensitive to that you would like us not to ask? I would have never thought to ask that, and so this is an example of why I think.
Well, and I'm just going to say,
I'm coming in with my perspective.
yeah, I love those comparisons, Andrew, because I think that not everyone who listens to the show has been in a cult, but they might be able to understand or relate to your experience of being in AA and being a recovering alcoholic, and so they might be able to relate to the show on a different level. I love analogies and comparisons. I think they're great.
and well, yeah, I just, when you have trauma in your life, I try not to compare it to trauma, but you're right. And I think there was another thought I just had. Of course. Oh, I just love getting old. That thought comes in and then goes, bye-bye.
Well,
okay, Melody, I think, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the other analogy that relates to your other podcast really is about being in a difficult or somewhat abusive, gaslighting relationship. Because when you're in a cult, those people are gaslighting you. The people at the top.
There are similarities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. So, and they're
coming
they're
out of a
lying to
horrible
you, gaslighting you. Yes. So that there's another similarity to where people can relate on that level as well.
Yeah. So, but I did get some feedback from people listening to the other podcast that said we don't want to hear cults. So here is Cultimatum, a new podcast dedicated to cults, where you don't have to listen to my sob story. And okay.
It'll be a spinoff. We'll
All
call
right.
it a
I
spinoff.
think it's time to wrap it up.
It's a spinoff podcast.
Oh, it's a spinoff. It's a spinoff podcast, but
Yes.
one that I got to be honest. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to require more work on my part, but and I've talked about this on the other podcast. I'm having hip surgery in a couple of weeks, but it'll give me, while I'm home recovering, some work to do and something to keep my mind occupied, and yada yada yada. So
I'm looking forward to working with you too, Andrew. I think this is going to be a fun journey for both of us. And I think it's going to be a healing journey for a lot of our listeners and our guests that come on.
And one more thing, this is the thought that I wanted to say is that if there's anybody out there that is struggling in a heartbreak, they break up, or they're lonely, or they're depressed, and they're approached by a stranger and they are trying to be recruited, this podcast might open your eyes to some of the tactics so you don't get sucked into, because maybe we could prevent somebody getting recruited into a cult. If you're listening and you're depressed and you're heartbroken, or you're lonely, or you think you don't belong and you want to belong to something, I'd also like to invite anybody to reach out to us at any time should they feel like they're lost, lonely, they don't belong. We don't have it yet, but shortly we will have all the information how you can reach us. We'll have an email. We're going to start a Facebook page, so you could come join us and be part of our little community.
And to add a little bit to what Andrew said too, the other thing I'm going to add is that if you are in the early stages of being in some type of group or organization where your gut is telling you something doesn't feel right, or you're seeing red flags, but you're kind of trying to ignore them because you're like, but I really feel like this is the right place, or I'm doing the right thing. But deep down, you feel like you're not. This might be a good podcast for you to listen to too, because you're going to hear about those red flags, those warning signs, and it's going to maybe stop you, and maybe you're going to take a couple steps back and look at it from the outside looking in, instead of just continuing to get deeper into it.
Yeah, if we could not prevent, but maybe help people not, maybe they have one toe in the pool, as they say, or one foot in the pool, whatever. Yeah. And they're not completely invested yet, and they, like you said, they have a gut feeling. This might help them say, hey, maybe I shouldn't continue with this. And
maybe I shouldn't put my whole leg in.
Yeah. or some people who just dive right in,
yes,
and then once you're in, they got you. Once their claws are into you, it's really hard to escape, and you'll hear that in some of the stories that we share with you. So
absolutely.
Okay, Melody, I'm excited. So
me too. So hopefully we'll have.
All right, okay, everybody.
Go ahead.
A new podcast, Cultimatum, the Culture of Cults, with Melody and myself, and it's coming soon to a theater near you.
There we go.
No, I'm hoping this will drop May 1st, 2024, and that'll be our launch date. And then you're going to see 10 or 12 episodes right up there, one after the other. But then after that, we'll be doing about 2 episodes a month.
Right.
That's not set in stone, but that's kind of like...
So they can binge listen at the beginning. Who doesn't like that? You got a long road trip, put it on, watch it, catch up. Listen to all those episodes.
That's how I listen to my podcast on my commute, and my grandkids are an hour away. There and back, it's 2 hours of podcast. I don't listen to music anymore. And some of the music, I know you're into country music, and I'm not putting any music down.
No.
Just today, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and that's my music. But even how many times can you listen to Led Zeppelin?
I'm not into just country music. I like just about all music.
Me too. But I mean, how many times can you listen to Led Zeppelin or AC/DC or
Yeah.
I can't think of some of
Leonard
the names. But
Skinner,
you get the point. So
Glenn Miller.
I was just gonna say Leonard Skinner. Yeah. After a while, I mean, if I'm on the beach and I'm taking in the sun and I'm enjoying my afternoon, yes, I'll put on some music. But
Yes.
anyway, all right, Melody. Let's
Let's
hope
this
that this
thing.
is a great success. And if you're listening, please pass this along to anybody that you know, that family members or friends or anybody that has escaped. If you're in a cult or got out and you know somebody who's still in, and
Yeah.
they're open to listening to this podcast, maybe that'll help them escape.
Certainly.
So,
Yes.
all right.
Okay.
All right, Melody. We'll talk soon.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Good night.